Her name was Rebecca Lawrence, a 34-year-old nurse from Manchester, England. Rebecca lived the kind of life most people would call normal, yet her nights were often filled with quiet questions she never dared to ask aloud. She had a small apartment in the city, a cat named Oliver who liked to sit by the window, and a habit of drinking chamomile tea before bed. Her days were long, filled with hospital corridors, the smell of antiseptic, and the quiet rhythm of heart monitors. She loved her work, yet there was always an ache inside her, a longing to understand why suffering existed, why people she cared for sometimes slipped away despite every effort. On Sundays, she attended church, but she often left with more questions than answers. She wondered if God still spoke to people in this age of noise, screens, and skepticism. Rebecca wasn't chasing wealth or fame. She wanted meaning. The world outside seemed increasingly unstable. Headlines about power outages, climate disasters, and political unrest had become the new normal. Still, she tried to believe that her small acts of kindness mattered in some larger plan. What she didn't know was that her life was about to be split in two, before and after, and that she would return from the other side with a message so urgent it would shake everyone who heard it. The day that changed everything. It was a rainy Thursday in early autumn, the kind of day where the air felt heavy and the clouds seemed to press down on the city. Rebecca had finished a long night shift at the hospital, the kind that left her bones aching and her mind foggy. She decided to take the scenic route home, a quieter road lined with tall oak trees whose leaves were turning gold and red. She was thinking about her patients that night, the elderly man who had held her hand and whispered, "Don't ever stop caring," and the young mother who had asked her if God could hear prayers said in anger. These moments stayed with her. They were the threads of a tapestry she didn't yet understand. Rebecca stopped at a small cafe she liked, ordering a coffee to go. The barista, a cheerful young man, joked that she looked like she needed a week in the Bahamas. She laughed, not knowing those would be the last moments of normalcy she would ever have. As she drove away, the rain intensified. The windshield wipers struggled to keep up. The road became slick, and the sound of water spraying under the tires was constant. Up ahead, a delivery truck swerved to avoid a fallen branch. Rebecca's instinct was to brake, but in that instant, everything happened too fast. Her car hydroplaned. She felt the back wheels lift slightly, the vehicle spinning sideways. The sound of metal crumpling filled her ears, a deafening, tearing noise. The world turned into a blur of headlights, rain, and shattered glass. In the seconds before everything went black, Rebecca thought of her mother's smile. She thought of Oliver waiting for her by the window, and then silence. Not the kind of silence you hear in a quiet room, but an absolute absence of sound, as if the whole world had inhaled and forgotten to breathe. Somewhere far away, she thought she heard a voice. Soft, calling her name, but it wasn't a voice from Earth. If you were in Rebecca's place, in that split second before everything fades, what's the very last thing you think you would see or hear? Write it in the comments. Your answer might surprise you more than you expect. The impact and the silence. The moment of impact didn't feel like a single blow. It felt like the world was folding in on itself. The force pressed her chest inward, as if an invisible hand had gripped her entire body. Her head snapped forward, and time seemed to slow into fragments, like shattered glass suspended in midair. She was aware of everything at once. The sharp metallic taste of blood in her mouth, the cold sting of rain against her skin through a broken window, the acrid smell of smoke mixed with gasoline, the weightless sensation, as if her body was both pinned and floating. Her heartbeat, once rapid with panic, began to slow. Each thud was softer than the last. The rains drumming on the car roof faded. Even the pain, which had been sharp and unbearable, began to dissolve, as though it was something happening to someone else. Rebecca realized she was no longer struggling to breathe. In fact, she wasn't breathing at all. And yet, she wasn't suffocating. A strange warmth spread from her chest, replacing the cold rain, wrapping her in something she could only describe as acceptance. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It had depth, like an ocean without waves. She sensed, rather than heard, a presence in that stillness. It wasn't frightening. It was the kind of silence you feel when someone who loves you is standing behind you, even if you can't see them yet. Her vision dimmed, but it wasn't the darkness of unconsciousness. It was the closing of one world and the opening of another. The shadows shifted, and in that space between two realities, she caught sight of something luminous. Not a headlight, not a reflection, something alive. And then she heard it. Her name. Rebecca. Not shouted, not whispered, spoken as if the voice had known her for eternity. If you heard your own name spoken by a voice not from this world, would you follow it, or would you try to stay? Tell me in the comments. I'm curious to see who would step into the unknown. Leaving the body. Behind at first, Rebecca thought she was still inside the wreck, until she noticed that the scene before her looked different, almost unreal. The rain no longer fell in chaotic streaks but drifted slowly, each droplet suspended as if hanging from invisible threads. The air shimmered faintly as though lit from within. She looked down and saw herself, her own body, slumped forward in the driver's seat, face pale, lips slightly parted. One arm hung awkwardly toward the floorboard. The sight was surreal, not horrifying, just strange. Like watching a photograph of someone you once knew very well but hadn't seen in years. Rebecca expected panic, but instead she felt light. Not just physically, but in a way that made every worry, every fear she'd ever carried fall away. Her thoughts were crystal clear, sharper than they had ever been in life. She realized she could see details she never would have noticed before. The way the raindrops refracted tiny rainbows, the faint steam rising from the truck's overheated engine, the trembling of a leaf still clinging to a branch above the crash. Then she became aware of a pull. Not gravity, not wind, something deeper. A gentle current drawing her upward and outward. She floated effortlessly through the crumpled metal of her car as if it were made of mist. The scene grew smaller beneath her, until it looked like a painting behind glass. The higher she rose, the more the world below faded into silence. No sirens yet, no voices, no chaos, only stillness. She glanced toward what should have been the sky, and instead of clouds, she saw a vast expanse of light, shifting in color from gold to pure white. It was not blinding. It was inviting. Rebecca felt an awareness around her, like invisible hands guiding her without touching. She didn't question it. She knew, somehow, that she was safe. Safe in a way she had never been before, even in her mother's arms as a child. The pull became stronger, and with it came a growing sense of anticipation, as if she were approaching a place she had been before but forgotten. She sensed that the voice that had called her name was waiting just beyond that brilliance. She took one last look down at her body in the wreckage, and knew without a doubt she was not going back. Not yet. Terasimes, imagine looking down and seeing your own body. Would you feel sorrow for it? Or freedom from it? Write your honest answer in the comments. Your words might help someone who fears death. The light was not a beam or a spotlight. It was alive. It seemed to breathe, to pulse gently, like the rhythm of a great and steady heart. Rebecca felt herself drawn toward it with an irresistible pull, not forced but invited, as though every part of her being had been waiting for this exact moment since the day she was born. The closer she came, the more she understood. This was not just light. It was love made visible. It wasn't the fragile, conditional love she had known on Earth. This love didn't need to be earned. It simply existed, limitless and absolute, pouring over her in waves that carried away every regret, every shame, every "I wish I had" she'd ever whispered in the dark. As she approached, the light began to take form, not in sharp lines, but in a presence more real than solid matter. A figure emerged, radiant yet gentle, dressed in a robe that seemed woven from the light itself. His eyes, they weren't just looking at her. They were looking through her, into the deepest places she didn't even know existed. Rebecca knew without a single doubt it was Jesus. She had seen paintings of him before, heard sermons, sung hymns, but none of those captured the reality before her. Here was not a distant religious icon. Here was someone who knew the sound of her laughter and the weight of her tears. His gaze held the memory of every moment of her life, not with judgment, but with the kind of compassion that could undo a person entirely. When he spoke her name this time, it wasn't only heard with her ears. It echoed inside her spirit. Rebecca. The sound of it filled her with a joy so fierce she thought she might dissolve into it. Lord, she managed, though she wasn't sure if she spoke aloud or if her thoughts simply reached him. Am I dead? He smiled, and it felt as if the whole expanse of light smiled with him. You have stepped out of what is temporary, he said, and into what is eternal. But your journey is not complete. She wanted to stay. Every part of her longed to sink into the light, to be consumed by it. Yet she could sense a gravity in his words, a reason she was here, a reason he had called her. The love surrounding her was warm, but beneath it was a current of urgency, as if he carried news she might not want to hear. Rebecca, his voice grew more solemn, the world you left is about to enter a great darkness, not just of night, but but of spirit and of truth, and there is very little time left. A shiver, not of fear but of awareness, rippled through her. What kind of darkness? She asked. His eyes seemed to deepen, reflecting storms she could not yet see. You will know, but you must go back and tell them. If you stood in the presence of Jesus and he told you to go back with a warning, would you obey instantly or hesitate because you wanted to stay? Tell me in the comments, and be honest. The message about the coming darkness. The light around them shifted, and Rebecca sensed that what Jesus was about to reveal was not meant to be taken lightly. The warmth in his presence remained, but there was now an undeniable weight in the air, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. Rebecca, he began, in 72 hours of human time, the world will face a great silence. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of disconnection. At first, she didn't understand, but as he extended his hand, the air between them changed. The light dimmed slightly, and in its place, moving images appeared. Not like a movie screen, but as though she was standing inside the visions themselves. She saw entire cities suddenly go dark. Skyscrapers that once blazed with neon and light now stood as black silhouettes against a moonless sky. The hum of electricity, the buzz of communication, the constant digital noise, gone. In their place, a heavy, almost tangible quiet fell over the earth. She heard people shouting in the streets, not in anger at first, but in confusion. Phones no longer lit up. Radios emitted only static. Satellites hung lifeless above the planet. Airplanes, mid-flight, drifted silently as if the sky itself had turned to stone. Rebecca's heart ached as she saw families separated, unable to reach each other. Hospitals stood powerless, their emergency generators failing one by one. Food supplies began to spoil. Fear turned to panic, panic to chaos. Jesus spoke again, and his voice carried through the vision. This will be a test of hearts. In the absence of the world's noise, many will hear the truth for the first time, but many more will hear only their own fear. The scene shifted. She now saw small pockets of light scattered across the darkness. Houses, streets, even entire villages untouched by the blackout. The people there seemed calm, some holding hands, others singing quietly under the stars. These are those who prepared their hearts, Jesus said. They have oil in their lamps. Rebecca felt the weight of those words, remembering the parable she had heard as a child but never truly understood. Lord, she asked, can this be stopped? His gaze met hers, and she already knew the answer before he spoke. No, but those who are warned can prepare. Tell them not to fear the dark. Tell them to seek the light that cannot be cut off. She understood now. The blackout was more than the absence of electricity. It was a spiritual dividing line, and she had been chosen to bring this warning back to a world that would not want to hear it. Sayarith thou. If you knew you had only 72 hours before a global blackout, would you prepare your home or your soul first? Be real in the comments. Which one would you choose? Visions of a world in chaos. The light surrounding Jesus began to tremble, not from weakness, but as if it carried the vibrations of something immense approaching. Rebecca felt herself drawn deeper into the vision. It was no longer simply shown to her. She was standing in the middle of it. At first, there was only darkness, stretching endlessly in every direction. But then shapes began to emerge. Roads with no headlights, cities with windows like hollow eyes, oceans without the shimmer of moonlight. The earth itself seemed to be holding its breath. Then, a sound. Not a mechanical hum or human noise, but a deep, resonant rumble, like the growl of the earth's own heartbeat. From the shadows, she saw movement. People stumbling through streets lit only by candles and dying flashlights. Parents clutching their children close. Others running, not toward safety, but away from something unseen. Above them, the sky shifted. It wasn't night as she had ever known it. The stars were gone. The heavens glowed faintly with strange colors, as if some unseen curtain had been pulled across the universe. There was beauty in it, but also a terrible foreboding. She turned and found herself in another scene. A marketplace, not in her own city, but somewhere far away. People were shouting in languages she didn't know, exchanging food for whatever they could offer. Bread, once taken for granted, was now worth gold. Clean water was guarded like treasure. There was no law, no order, only desperation. The vision pulled her again. Now she stood in a room lit by a single oil lamp. Around the flame sat a small group of people, their faces calm but resolute. They prayed together, not asking for the darkness to end, but for strength to endure it. In their eyes, she saw a peace that no storm could steal. Then came the most unsettling image. She stood on a hill overlooking a massive city. In the distance, the darkness was split by sudden, violent flashes of red and orange. Not lightning, but fire. Yet even amid the chaos, she noticed something strange. Here and there, faint beams of light rose into the sky like pillars, untouched by the destruction around them. Jesus' voice came again, steady and unshaken. Do not be afraid when you see the world in turmoil. Fear will divide men, but faith will unite them. The darkness will not last forever, but what it reveals will not be forgotten. Rebecca realized the blackout was only the first shaking. What followed would test the very core of human hearts. Some would cling to hatred, others to hope, but all would be forced to choose. The vision faded, and she found herself back in the presence of Jesus, still trembling from what she had seen. If you were in total darkness and could see only one thing, a weapon, a bag of food, or a Bible, which would you reach for first? Write it in the comments and explain why. He choice and the return. Rebecca stood before Jesus, her spirit still trembling from the visions. Every part of her longed to stay here, in this place without pain, without fear, without the unending noise of the world she had left behind. Here, the love surrounding her was so complete that even her deepest wounds no longer ached. She wanted to tell him, "Please, let me remain. I don't want to go back." But before she could speak, he looked into her eyes, and she knew he already heard the cry of her heart. "Rebecca," he said gently, "I know you want to stay. I know the weight of what you have seen is heavy, but your time is not yet complete. You have been entrusted with this message, and there are those whose lives depend on hearing it." Her chest tightened. The thought of returning to her broken body, of waking in a cold hospital room, or perhaps never waking at all, made her spirit hesitate. "Lord, I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not of death, but of being alone when I speak. What if they don't believe me? What if they laugh?" Jesus stepped closer, and the light around him seemed to embrace her like a cloak. "You will not be alone. I will be with you in every word, every breath. Some will mock, yes, others will turn away, but a few, a precious few, will hear and be ready. And for them, you must go back." His eyes held hers, and in that gaze was both tenderness and an unshakable firmness. She understood this was not a request, it was a calling. In that moment, she felt something stir behind her, a pull, the opposite of the one that had drawn her toward him. She turned and saw it, far below, through layers of light and shadow, the broken wreck of her car, the flashing red lights of an ambulance arriving, the dark silhouette of a paramedic leaning over her lifeless body. Her heart wavered. This world felt so far away now, so heavy, so small. But the thought of ignoring his command felt heavier still. Jesus reached out, and for a moment, she thought he was going to take her hand and pull her into eternity forever. Instead, he touched the center of her forehead with 2 fingers. The touch wasn't forceful, it was gentle, but it carried the strength of the universe. "My peace will go with you," he said, "and when your task is done, you will come home." The pull behind her grew stronger, and she realized she was being drawn backward, away from the light, away from him. Panic rose in her. "Lord, please," she began. But before she could finish, his voice echoed one last time in her spirit. "Do not fear the darkness, Rebecca. Be the light." Then the brilliance shattered into a rushing tunnel of shadow and sound, and the world of flesh slammed back into her like a wave. If you stood face to face with Jesus and he asked you to return to a broken world with a hard message, would you accept instantly or struggle to obey? Write your answer in the comments. The weight of an urgent mission. Rebecca's return to her body was not soft or graceful. It was violent. She gasped like a drowning person breaking the surface after too long underwater. Cold air tore into her lungs, and with it came a rush of pain, sharp, searing, unbearable. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her head throbbed, her vision swam. She could feel blood drying on her face, the sticky weight of her hair matted to her skin. The world was loud again, too loud. The blare of sirens, the shouts of paramedics, the crunch of boots on shattered glass. It all crashed over her at once, so much harsher than the serene stillness of the other side. A paramedic leaned into her view, his voice urgent but strangely far away. "Stay with me. Can you hear me?" She wanted to tell him she had been somewhere far beyond his comprehension, that she had spoken with Jesus, that she had seen what was coming, but the words caught in her throat, tangled between pain and disbelief. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and jolts of movement. Every bump sent fresh waves of agony through her body. But beneath the pain, beneath the disorientation, There was a new weight, heavier than any injury. The mission. She knew what she had to do, and it terrified her more than dying ever had. In the days that followed, as her body began to heal, she faced another kind of wound, one no doctor could see. When she told the first nurse about her experience, the woman smiled politely but didn't meet her eyes. Later, Rebecca overheard 2 staff members whispering about hallucinations and oxygen deprivation. Her closest friend visited and listened quietly. But when Rebecca spoke about the 72-hour countdown and the coming blackout, the friend's expression changed from concern to pity. "You've been through trauma, Beck. Maybe you just dreamed it." She wanted to scream that it was real, that she had felt his touch, heard his voice, seen the earth shrouded in a darkness no generator could lift. But instead, she swallowed the words and let the silence hang heavy. The nights were the hardest. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the visions again. Cities without light, voices crying in confusion, pockets of calm among oceans of panic. She could hear his command over and over. "Do not fear the darkness. Be the light." The urgency burned inside her. She knew she couldn't waste a single day. People needed to be warned, to prepare, not just with supplies, but with faith. And yet, how could she convince them when even those closest to her didn't believe? She stood at her apartment window one night, still weak, still bandaged, looking out at the glittering city lights. "You don't know," she thought, staring at the buildings. "You don't know how quickly all of this can be gone." Her reflection in the glass looked pale, haunted, but her eyes carried something new, resolve. Takuseo. If you carried a message that could save lives but no one believed you, would you keep speaking or give up? Tell me honestly in the comments. A call to those who still have time. It was just after midnight when Rebecca decided she could no longer stay silent. Her injuries still ached, her ribs still tender with every breath, but the heaviness in her heart was greater than any physical pain. She sat at her small kitchen table, the glow of a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. In front of her lay a notebook, its pages blank except for the first line she had written hours earlier. "You have 72 hours before the world changes." She stared at the words, feeling again the pull of that vision. The darkness swallowing cities, the fear in the streets, the calm faces of those who had prepared their hearts. The memory of Jesus' eyes when he said, "Tell them," was still etched into her very soul. Rebecca picked up her phone, opened the camera, and hit record. This wasn't going to be polished or planned or safe. It was going to be the truth. Her voice shook at first. "My name is Rebecca Lawrence. 3 weeks ago, I died in a car accident. I left my body. I stood before Jesus Christ, and he gave me a message to share with you, one that most of you won't want to hear." She told them about the light, about his voice calling her name, about the visions of chaos and the blackout that would come without warning. She spoke of the fear she had seen in some faces, and the unshakable peace she had seen in others. She warned them that this was not just an event of power failing, but of truth being tested. "You have 72 hours when it begins," she said firmly, looking straight into the lens. "In that time, you can either let fear consume you, or you can stand in a light that no darkness can touch. But the preparation has to start now, not when the power cuts, not when the streets go silent, but now." She paused, her eyes glistening. "I'm not telling you to stockpile just food and water, though you should. I'm telling you to stockpile faith. Forgive who you need to forgive. Let go of what's rotting your heart. If you wait until the darkness comes, you may not have the strength to choose the light." The words poured from her as if they weren't entirely her own. At moments, her voice grew stronger, steadier, as though he himself was speaking through her. She ended with a plea. "I don't care if you believe me. I care if you're ready. Please, for your family, for your soul, be ready." When she stopped recording, her hands were trembling. She uploaded the video before she could think twice, knowing full well it might be mocked, ignored, or even taken down. But the message was out now. Her mission had begun. She sat back in her chair, breathing heavily, the city outside still glittering as though nothing was wrong, and yet in her spirit she could feel it. The clock had already started ticking. If you heard a stranger say you had only 72 hours before the world changed forever, would you take action or wait and see if it was true? Write your honest answer in the comments. Your words might change someone's choice. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. The glow from her phone screen kept lighting up the room as comments poured in. Some curious, some mocking, some deeply shaken. She read them all, her heart heavy with the knowledge that for many, the warning would come too late. But she also saw something else. Messages from strangers saying they had started praying for the first time in years. People reaching out to forgive someone they hadn't spoken to in decades. Families deciding to spend the weekend together instead of glued to screens. Tiny flickers of light beginning to pierce the darkness before it even arrived. She knew she couldn't stop now. One video wasn't enough. She would keep speaking until her voice was gone if she had to. She didn't know the exact day or hour the blackout would begin, only that it was coming. And when it did, every second would matter. Rebecca walked to her window and looked out over the city. From here, it still looked alive. Bright, humming, full of movement. But in her spirit, she saw what was beneath it. A fragile system, one flip of a switch away from silence. She closed her eyes and prayed, "Lord, help them see before the lights go out." When she opened her eyes, she imagined every person who would watch her story. The skeptic, the believer, the one who laughs, the one who secretly feels the chill of truth in their bones. To each one, she had the same message. The clock is ticking. The question isn't whether you believe me. The question is whether you're ready. I've done my part. Now it's in your hands. Her voice would echo in their minds when the darkness came. Some would remember too late. Others would remember just in time. And for those few, everything would change. If the blackout began right now, this very moment, what would be the very first thing you'd do? Write your answer in the comments, and maybe it will inspire someone else to act before it's too late. If you felt the weight of this story, subscribe and stay close. The next message might come sooner than you think, and you don't want to miss it. Rebecca didn't sleep that night. The glow from her phone screen kept lighting up the room as comments poured in, some curious, some mocking, some deeply shaken. She read them all, her heart heavy with the knowledge that for many, the warning would come too late. But she also saw something else. Messages from strangers saying they had started praying for the first time in years. People reaching out to forgive someone they hadn't spoken to in decades. Families deciding to spend the weekend together instead of glued to screens. Tiny flickers of light beginning to pierce the darkness before it even arrived. She knew she couldn't stop now. One video wasn't enough. She would keep speaking until her voice was gone if she had to. She didn't know the exact day or hour the blackout would begin, only that it was coming. And when it did, every second would matter. Rebecca walked to her window and looked out over the city. From here, it still looked alive, bright, humming, full of movement. But in her spirit, she saw what was beneath it. A fragile system, one flip of a switch away from silence. She closed her eyes and prayed, "Lord, help them see before the lights go out." When she opened her eyes, she imagined every person who would watch her story. The skeptic, the believer, the one who laughs, the one who secretly feels the chill of truth in their bones. To each one, she had the same message. The clock is ticking. The question isn't whether you believe me. The question is whether you're ready. I've done my part. Now it's in your hands. Her voice would echo in their minds when the darkness came. Some would remember too late. Others would remember just in time. And for those few, everything would change. If the blackout began right now, this very moment, what would be the very first thing you'd do? Write your answer in the comments, and maybe it will inspire someone else to act before it's too late. If you felt the weight of this story, hit the subscribe button now so you don't miss the next message. And if you can, send a $100 super thanks to help keep this warning alive and reaching more people before the clock runs out. Every single act of support could mean another life prepared.